Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar on minimum viable data governance, an agile approach to optimize your modern data ecosystem. I'm Kim Johnson with the Solutions and Services Marketing team. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention a few quick housekeeping items. One, we will save time for Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, please drop those in the chat throughout the presentation and we'll talk through them at the end. And then after the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a short survey. It'll open automatically in your browser, and we would very much appreciate your feedback about today's webinar. Our hosts today are Rex Washburn, Chief Data Architect at CDW, and Ben Castleton, Principal Consultant for Data Quality at CDW. And now, without further ado, Rex, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. Really happy to be here and happy to have everybody joining. Still see some people filtering in, but we're going to get started so that we can cover the topic and dive right in. Ben, you want to sort of progress us forward here? So I think you have the con. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of sort of an overview, just a very small bit about the data practice at CDW, and we'll dive right into the core topic of the day. But I think this is really important when related to the topic of data governance. So the data and analytics practice within CDW sits in a larger ecosystem of other practices, right? And so that's everything from the networking to the cloud to the hardware to cyber to managed services, platform engineering, so on and so forth. And why is that important? We're here to talk about data governance. Well, really, when you look at data itself, data is really a team sport. We need the partnership of our cloud team. We need the partnership of an infrastructure team, potentially. We need the partnership of our cyber team. And this is critical because as part of just having a robust, secure, well-governed platform, you don't want to have poorly implemented starting points, right? So a data person, you don't want them wearing multiple hats. You don't want them showing up on Monday and being your data person, Tuesday being your cloud person, and Wednesday being your security person. It just doesn't really work that well. You need deep subject matter experts for every area of this domain that surrounds your analytics platform. Also, when you think about data governance itself, it's actually sort of a partnership with this overall security team and has that alignment with the overall data protection stance of the enterprise. So where we see the greatest adoption of data governance and the most comprehensive adoption of data governance is when the CDO and CISO roles sort of are meeting together, creating that Venn diagram, and that overlap is where DPS as well as data governance sort of comes together. And I think this is really a key aspect of the story of CDW. The trust that you've put in us over the years is something that we make sure that you have the true trusted providers to deliver all aspects of your data ecosystem and make it successful and tie it into your enterprise. Ben, you want to keep moving for us? So on the data and analytics practice, we cover everything from strategy, what you should look like, what your environment should look like, how to deal with it, how to adopt it, how to evaluate it, through building that core ecosystem, through into the overall data governance. And there's a lot to governance, and we're going to focus on that MVDG, or that minimum viable data governance, and then all the way to insights. And really, when we look at this, and we'll talk about this a little bit more here in a second, this ecosystem continuously evolves. And I think coming out of the slide, the one message I'd like you to take with you is do not look at the data ecosystem, the data governance approach as a static item. It's going to be constantly evolving. And we have ML AI driving that evolution for us quite a bit. But you want to constantly think of it as something evolving. It's never going to end. Just like with cyber, it never ends. Data never ends. It keeps growing and keeps evolving. And you need to approach it with this sort of mindset as you dive into it. So let's dive into minimum viable data governance and sort of why we created it and what value it brings to the business overall. We're going to take one step back, and we're just going to sort of mention the data. Nope. One step forward, Ben. Figure of speech, not a directional steering mechanism. The data ecosystem is really foundational. So what we're striving for is on the far right, the data culture. But unless the business can get the data when they want it, how they want it, format they want it, and with the overall structure that they're looking for and the completeness that they're wanting, they're not really going to embrace data in your organization. So having that core functional modern data ecosystem is really critical to both grow data governance as well as to grow data culture. All right. But the key next step is that governance. If you don't trust your data, if you don't feel that that data is complete and whole and something that you can go to the street with, that you can make critical business decisions with, you're not going to embrace it. Doesn't matter how good the platform is, how good the technical solve is, the data governance has to be there. And the two together really have to reflect the needs and the value drivers of the business. One of the things we do a lot is when we're first having discussions is we don't want to talk about the technology as much is how do you make money and how does the data that you have, how is it important to you making money? How is the governance of that data important? And then expand from there because we really want to focus on a data platform that's going to drive value to the business. Our overall goal for this is not just to have good quality data and trusted data, but we also want a data culture. This is extraordinarily important in today's world because the data culture almost acts as a mental firewall for AI. If I'm used to working with data, if I'm used to seeing what good quality data looks like for my business use cases, when I start working with AI output or ML output, when I start working with a chatbot, I'm going to be able to look at that data in a much more critical fashion. I'm going to detect hallucinations naturally if I have that sense of data culture. If the concept of data literacy and data culture, and you're thinking of that and like, wow, that is way in our future, it doesn't have to be. It's really a matter of just getting those fundamental pieces built out and starting to grow in your business and allowing the business to pull that forward. So it's a little bit different of approach versus we build it and they will come. We're really saying, let's start building the foundations. Let's make sure it's of quality and let the business pull us forward. Let's grow that data culture organically, and we grow it in a partnership with our customers as we move forward. And I think that this is a message that I'd really like everybody to look at your data platform in a very simple way and focus on, do I have a way to give the business the data they need and that they want? And then look closely at the data governance. And hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll have an idea of how to make data governance less of this sort of monolithic monstrosity that you're like, okay, we've done it before, and how do we do it again? And do we even do it again? Ben, let's keep going. All right, so let's start off with why is data governance important? I think metrics-wise, this is probably the most important. This is a really great starting point. Probably one of the more important points is time analysts are spending with data. They're spending 60% of their time searching for data. They're looking to say, okay, where is it? How do I find it? Is it worthwhile? That's a lot of time. If you think of one person in your organization, one key decision maker, one key data SME, if 60% of their time is spent just searching for data, there's so much value lost in that situation. Poor quality data, I believe the 3.1 trillion is probably low for today's world, simply because AI is driving us to see how bad the data is nowadays. And that's one of the big blockers for successful AI is just poor quality data. And we're running into this all the time, whether it's an ML model or whether it's like an LLM or a chatbot or an agentic framework. We really have this constant barrier that we run into, which is poor quality data. Platforms that haven't been nourished over the last several years are now not ready to be able to service this growing passion within the industry of ML and AI. And then $9 billion spent on compliance. So as the world starts realizing, hey, with all this AI, we really need to lean into privacy. We need to lean into data sovereignty, you owning your data, or who owns your data, how is that data being used? Compliance to regulatory pressures is going to be key. If you don't have a platform that has any amount of governance in it, tracing that down is a big challenge. Depending upon the regulatory pressures or the regulations that you're following, there could be actual, legal or financial consequences of that. None of that needs to be impacting your business nowadays. We want to focus on delivering quality data and focusing on growth. So as we move into that, we look at why we created MVDG, why minimum viable data governance. And it's really because if you look at the flywheel on the left, that's sort of a comprehensive view of the traditional world of data governance, as well as some elements of the information lifecycle governance and DPS. But that is a lot. And time again, when we go and work with customers, we'd hear, I've tried data governance in the past, we haven't succeeded. We have a data governance program going. Well, how long has it been going? Well, several years, and there's really nothing to show for it, right? Or data governance has been deployed, but it's considered a barrier to successful analytics and to basically self-service analytics. So it's constantly bypassed. So really, it doesn't exist because there's all of the shadow data and analytics sitting around in different business divisions or business units or lines of business. And what's happening is the data governance is really not being adopted. And so we were looking at how do we build in data governance from the very beginning. We wanted this to be something that when you work with CDW, when we're done building a platform, when we're done partnering on delivering that analytics ecosystem, that you have the foundational data governance elements right from the beginning. So this is really, MVDG is the way we build data platforms, right? It's just how we think about it, how we build the DNA of the platform. So it's really all about building agility and driving an iterative nature to the data governance into the actual foundational platform that we build. And we want to start that on day zero. So there's a lot of pieces here that aren't day zero engagements. Like if you think about the overall policy and process and people and technology that's behind it, that can take time. And it is a journey, but we want to get something in there that we can start working with right away. So let's really dive into what that is. The core principles of MVDG are early integration, business users, key business users are stewards. And I would actually look at that as like, people points of data gravity, those organic stewards that have data skills already, that you already are your go-to people for data. Platform native functionality is key. So choosing platforms that allow you to embrace data governance from the day zero. And that's, nowadays platforms like Snowflake and Databricks and Fabric, Azure Fabric, all have functionality built into them that would allow us to embrace this MVDG paradigm from the very start. It will look different based upon the functionality of the platform. And when Ben starts presenting here in a little while, he's going to go through an example of one of the elements of minimum viable data governance on a platform, and you'll see how that's unique to that platform and maybe be able to look to compare that to your own platform. This does not preclude things like it could be a SQL server. You may have to adjust how you're looking at the data and how you're looking at MVDG to be able to embrace that to some extent. And then also balancing between control and agility. So the old days of a small group that meets monthly around data governance and dictates how data will be used and the standards that will follow and who will have access and who won't have access. I'm not saying that that's not viable, but I'm saying it's not viable. Basically, what happens consistently is what I see is customers or business users bypassing or moving around it, whether it's through spreadsheets or access databases or departmental SQL servers or something. If the control is too tight, somebody's going to find a way to move around it. And so you want to balance this sort of platform day zero deployment along with some of that centralized control. And if you're a regulated industry, obviously that will change your approach, but it will also be part of your DNA as a business, and it'll be part of how you do business is to adapt to that. For example, in healthcare, everybody knows how to work with HIPAA, or hopefully everybody knows how to work with HIPAA. So these are some key elements. So, but make data governance part of your foundation at the very start of your journey. And that is a real key message to look at this and a lens to look at it through. So let's jump through on the domains of MVDG, Ben.
Yeah, Rex, just before I go on, when I hear you talk about that, I hear competitiveness, like our competitiveness in the market has a lot to do with our agility and how we use data. But on the other side of it, if we don't have good control and governance over our data, then we also have a problem our competitiveness in the market. So
Exactly.
really balancing those two themes.
And I think the big difference, Ben, between the traditional message of having that centralized data governance team that drives everything, and where we're leaning with MVDG is trying to bring more agility forward. So we've sort of everybody's leaned towards either not doing it or let's have tight control and go from a process policy first. And now we're really saying, hey, listen, let's back this up and bring more agility back into governance. And so we start with data stewardship. And this is probably the hardest thing for a lot of data governance initiatives to roll out. And generally what we are finding is a lot of times where we do encounter data stewards, they are not data stewards that have had a data history. They were assigned the role. They had extra bandwidth, so now they're a data steward. Or they're a manager in a department, so that manager is now a data steward. That can work in certain situations with the right sponsorship, with the right drivers and the business behind it. But we're taking a little bit of a different tact. Throughout my career, throughout Ben's career, and I'm sure for many of the people on this call, there's always people in the business that you go to for data. They are the known data SMEs. They give you quality data. If you're about to go into a board meeting and you have to pull some numbers, you go to person X and you grab the data, right?
It's almost like they have an aura about them. You just,
yeah,
you can see
data
it.
aura. Yeah. We're right over there. That person that's glowing, they know data, right? Or they're the Excel guru in the business, and that's the person you always go to because she always has the data. So, really what we're trying to do is bring these organic data stewards and bring them into the decision-making process very early. And we'll talk a little bit about stewardship because that's sort of the harder part of MVDG. But when we're starting to scope a project, we're very first days, we're wanting to identify who those people are and bring them forward. Because they are the people that will make us more successful as partners. Data quality is one of the first technical and probably the most important technical piece of MVDG. We've raised that importance because anything you produce downstream from that is going to be challenged, and it's going to cost more to build, it's going to cost more to implement overall, and cost more to consume if you haven't dealt with data quality. Now, we're really looking at data quality in the platform that we're building, but we don't want to stop there because as we're talking through the data quality needs, we're really also going to be pushing back and saying, where can we shift this closer to source? Is there an ability to go back to the source and start solving some of this? Too often the answer is, oh, that's hard. We don't want to do it. It's an operational system. We can't touch it. And there are plenty of cases I've seen where you cannot touch those systems. But I've also seen many times where it's impossible until we look at the total cost of actually solving it in the data platform or the analytics platform. And then suddenly we realize, oh, well, that's a lot easier to establish triggers in a database than the source system. It might take us a few weeks, might delay a little bit of analytics platform, but it's a much cheaper solve for us to do. So don't stop looking and always look left towards the source to start building more data quality and data governance. Data security, I will always say that data security is table stakes. You got to have a secure platform, but when I think about data security here, I'm really thinking about that more tactical analytic security. Who gets access to what data? How is it produced? How are those data products served up? Who has access to them? As well as, is my overall platform secure? Are all access points secure? This is going to go back to that talk about the partnership between CDO and CISO. We do not want to have the teams looking at each other and going, well, you guys do your security thing, we'll do our security thing, we never talk. There needs to be security needs to permeate the data platform. We need to know what's going on in that data platform. When large volumes of data are moving around, that's how we avoid things like exfil hacks and oopsie leaked buckets and things like that. And vice versa, the data team can really leverage the security team to make sure that their data is always secure. Metadata management is probably that one thing we always forget about, we talk about, but really building in metadata management from the get-go, and then tactical data privacy. And
I got to stop you, man. I mean, we're talking about minimum viable data governance here, and we have security and privacy on here. It's just like, it's flooring me because I've never seen that not be a years long thing. And how can that possibly be minimum viable data governance?
Well, it's sort of like the date right from the beginning. Right as we're starting to build the platform, whether it's a Snowflake or Fabric or Databricks, we're building out the RBAC models. We're building out those access models based upon actual usage patterns. And they may not mirror what security has, but that really is table stakes. So we start that off from day zero. Key there is agility. Don't boil the ocean, right? We're not trying to secure every bit of data throughout the organization, all the data sitting in SharePoint, all the data sitting everywhere. We're really focusing on the analytics platform. That doesn't mean that over time that doesn't expand, but we're focused here. And on the data privacy, I totally agree. And that's why we sort of call it tactical, because this is the dynamic data masking. This is the, what is PII? How is it handled? That kind of thing within the platform. The regulatory policies, the regulatory pressures, we have the ability to handle that, but we also, for the larger needs, that is a longer journey, but we have an entire team. There's a team within our security group of actual lawyers that specialize in privacy law, and they're able to provide consultative feedback on, everything from GDPR to the California Data Privacy Act, New York's Act, so on and so forth, and make sure that our customers legally, truly are dealing with that. Now, they're not practicing law on your behalf, but they know how to deal with all that regulatory compliance. We're more a recipient of that, but we also know PII needs to be masked, right? And that's built into the platforms, Ben. So agree with you, but I'm right, you're wrong. Build it into the platform, though, is the key there. And I know you're going to show some of that. So let's do the next click on this one. So stewards, I keep forgetting when I add animation. So apologize to you for that, Ben. But we're going to focus on stewards, because if we can start with stewardship, that's probably one of the areas that we'll get the most bang for our buck across the overall platform. We won't design without the business. If we have the stewards starting as part of our partners. And there's really, I'm going to iterate this a few times, but there's one step before stewards that I think is probably more important than anything else. Ben, you care to hazard a guess as to what we always want to see before we start stewardship?
Oh, I mean, yeah, come on, Rex, I know the answer. I mean, you're really softballing me here.
Well,
let me tell you what, I gave a data governance I gave a data governance presentation a few weeks ago to a client, and I talked about all this stuff. And at the end of that presentation, the one feedback I got was, I'm so glad you talked about finding an executive sponsor. Yeah. And I thought, well, that was the easiest thing on my slide decks. Like that, why is that a big deal? But that's the feedback I got, was that's where we struggle. We have never done that well enough. So that's my guess.
Yeah, and you're spot on, because as we talk about stewards, there's one step beforehand, and that is finding that executive sponsor as high up the totem pole as you can go, right? And it's really critical to have that executive sponsor to make the data stewardship work, because everybody has a day job, and stewardship can sound really ominous. And that's why we have, these corny phrases like, organic points of data gravity and, things like that. But it's really what we're doing is we're trying to say, hey, listen, stewardship doesn't have to be scary, right? Secure your executive sponsorship, because we want the executive sponsors to recognize the people that are already organically providing that stewardship for the business and just have gone unrecognized. So right there, it's an immediate positive feedback loop for those stewards. It's an immediate positive boost for them, right? So bring them in early, make sure they know their role to start off with, is we just want you to provide the wisdom that you've been providing the business this entire time. We want to get your wisdom, and we want to make sure the wisdom is reflected in the design and architecture of the platform. We want to make sure that that continues going forward and that they are participatory in the overall success of the platform, because they're also our power users. They're the people that are going to sing the praises of the platform, and they'll also give us the criticism so we can grow and get better every step of the way. So I generally find that our most successful projects, the places where we're working with customers as a key critical element of their overall analytic success for a long period of time is where we have really strong stewards to partner with. And then you basically need to bring them in and allow them to have that constant feedback. So don't just bring the stewards in on day zero. Talk with them constantly. Make them part of the UAT discussion. When you win, they win. Make sure that they're giving you feedback on everything you're building. Don't look at, oh, I read the book on data mesh and we're going to build the data mesh. Is that something the stewards think will actually succeed in the business? And if not, if there's an organizational change management kind of challenge, they will know. So that's how the business grows with the IT piece. I generally, without stewards is generally when I get called in, and because there's a data platform that somebody spent hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on, and it's just not performing. Almost every time I look and nobody brought in stewards, nobody brought in the business. So it was just a technical experiment that we hoped would serve the business. And that's what we're trying to avoid here. And the last thing is really empowering decision-making with domains. As your platform grows, as domains firm up, let the stewards have more autonomy. Allow them to help you grow that. It'll make it easier for your data team, your technical data engineers to be more agile and focus on what they do amazing, as well as allowing the business to ensure that data is consumed in the best possible way. So let's stop talking about stewards and keep going, Ben. This is the last thing, people, process, and policy. So people ask this all the time, and I almost treat people, process, and policy as a separate stream. MVDG, your zero-day data governance foundations, can be implemented right at the start. That's something that will have a start date, and while it'll evolve over time, there will be that point where you're like, okay, we have this in place. We have this foundational data governance engineering in place. The stewardship, that overall process and the tying out to regulations, making sure you have more and more business leaders engaged in this, that takes time. When customers start here, that tends to be when they say, we tried data governance, we failed, because this is a lot of folks that you have to all get coming to the table at the same time and all saying similar things. But that's also dealing with a white sheet of paper. And we all know that if you're going into a meeting and you want to steer the meeting in a direction, you start with some concepts for people to comment on. But you got to give people something to ground out on. MVDG gives people a foundation to start this with. So actually you have a place to grow with the policy. The policies have a place to tie back into, so that immediately, as soon as a policy is formed, you can look at that and see how does that tie into MVDG and how do we actually materialize that into the platform. So it's a little bit of a flip on the head. We're not ignoring it, but we all are saying that that's a longer journey. And we treat those as two separate streams with different consulting endeavors too, because it's really two different set of skill sets. One, more engineering based, one, more organizational change management, executive interfacing, business interfacing, very different workflows, different timescales even. So those are really critical aspects. Let's keep going, Ben.
So Rex, we've heard that, but what do you want people to think is the first step after this webinar?
Oh, now who's tossing up the softballs?
I'm sorry. We've got to bring it in there.
Action. So yeah, identify a senior leader as exec sponsor. Now, this is not the director of data, or could be in your organization, but generally it's you want to go up and be as close to CEO or president as possible, right? I would often say whoever can sign the biggest check is the person that can do it, but it's also the person that is a leader that can recognize the stewards, that can make sure that they can bring people together, that, we're at CDW, we're saying better together, we come together as a team to grow, right? To make amazing happen. But while those seem like phrases, it's how we succeed. All the way back to that first slide that I showed, CDW succeeds by bringing in a team to solve your needs. Without that, well, we end up with what you're presenting now, Ben, and this is what we don't want. This is what happens when MVDG is not even considered.
Yeah, this is I think anyone who's been in data for a while has sort of seen this or heard about it, and it's what we're trying to avoid.
This is more like what I want. I want something well organized that looks like, Actually, I think maybe even a CDW warehouse is cooler than that, but on the left side. And on the right side, that's where I would love to take a vacation at. I can see you've been having some fun with AI, but day zero, okay, we want our dream warehouse. We want our dream lake house. We want you to have it, right? So really, there's a lot that goes into that. Business use cases, stewards are activated, security models, data architecture, data modeling strategy. Ben, when you made this, were you actually thinking about MVDG or were you thinking about like some other data governance approach? This is a lot here.
I mean, no, this is like everything that you want, and we're on our way there. This is not day zero. Everything in here doesn't all happen on day zero, but I'm going to dive into what happens. And I'm a tech guy, so I definitely am going to lean towards what are the technical things we can do right away. But
which is why I let you told you to drive the thing, because I knew we were going there. So I'll tell you what, Ben, why don't you just sort of dive into that whole lake?
Yeah, thanks, Rex. Enough of the dad jokes. Okay, I'm gonna get into the tech here.
All right. I don't know why that security model is blowing up, but
okay, so quick recap. I know this is hypothetical because I'm not going to get feedback from you, but I want you to remember these core principles. And we're going to go back to the domains as I go through the tech. I'm going to look at the platform functionality that's built right in. And you can do this with Snowflake. You can do it with Databricks. You can do it with Fabric. You can do it on the other clouds. There's so much built in now that when I was trying to do this 5, even 10 years ago, forget about it. Even 5 years ago, though, I didn't have the functionality that you have today. And so we'll dive into an example. And I'm just going to guess that the audience would like to hear us dive into data quality. That is near and dear to my heart. And we've got to make sure we figure out a way to build data quality in from day zero.
Yeah, and I would say data quality is the minimum of minimum viable governance or minimum viable data governance, right?
The minimum. It's like when you have one person on a team and you're trying to start a new company and that company has one person, you have to think about data quality. So there you go. I'm gonna run through kind of what the framework is in Databricks, because you can implement so much of this right away. In Databricks, it just happens to be the one I'm doing. I could do this in Snowflake or Fabric, and we'll just show like what you would use in Databricks. So first step on data quality is how am I getting the data in to my platform? Then what are the patterns around transforming that data so that we can create business rich information eventually for stakeholders. And then I want to basically be able to see how that's being processed and the orchestration of all that, because there's dependencies involved. And so in Databricks, we'll look at how that happens. And then you've got lineage and profiling. Those two tools are going to help you along with data quality rules to see like, okay, what's happening with the data? Where is it coming from? What does it look like? And then I want to have some tools to help me monitor and alerting and observability around that. So I'm just showing here a quick little video of in Databricks. You've got the ability to just kind of connect up to your sources using Lakeflow, or you can use the partners. And as you can see, as you go through that, then you'll have these, you'll have all of that show up for you in pipelines. And I'm not going to go too much into ingestion. There's a whole, I mean, that's a whole industry, actually. There's a whole industry around that, but there's great partners, and there is the ability coming up to be able to do a lot of that right in Databricks.
Well, I think on the pipeline piece, Ben, one of the key things we wanted to also call out is depending upon the tooling, and this is key with MVDG, is like looking at your tooling selection as its ability to support MVDG. But in a lot of cases, like if we were doing streaming, we're using Kafka, Confluent Kafka or something like that, we could easily build out some amount of data quality checking right within the pipeline. So we're constantly looking to shift this start the process as early on, because we don't want to spend money and resources on bad quality data or overburdened processes if we do it too far down to the right.
Yeah, it's most people think of data quality where it hits them at the right. And if you're a data engineer, you're thinking about it like in the transformations. But Rex is 100% like spot on. You have to be thinking about it from an organization perspective as far left as you can. And so that both is involved in watching your pipelines coming in as well as going back to source systems. So once we get into the data platform, how are you going to organize the data? I say this all the time to my clients. You lose most of your time around organization. I say this to my kids as well. Funny, yeah, that's where most of the time goes, is in how you're organized. And so having patterns for how you're going to transform that data and the architecture just speeds up development teams, and it helps you to maintain quality because everyone knows what those patterns are. A very common pattern in the industry, I don't know if Databricks actually kind of was originally pushing this, but we've been doing it a long time before it ever came out. But Databricks made this really popular, the medallion architecture, which basically means you've got a bronze layer where you don't have any transformations that allows you to trace that data back to source without, having to go through a bunch of logic. Then you have silver layer where you're really curating it and doing data quality constraints and rules. You're making sure that it matches a data model that you expect for the business. And then the gold layer is really about presentation, whether that's aggregations or whether it's putting it into different marts with different ability to slice and dice it on different dimensions and facts for presenting it in a BI layer. So that pattern, super popular. It's popular not just in Databricks, it's popular in data warehouses and now data lakes as well. And once you get into the data, though, when you start thinking about creating rules, the reason why I put this before is because it's really hard to make a data quality rule without knowing what that data looks like. And so I always think of profiling as one of my first technical steps to creating data quality rules, is just to look at the data. I used to say in the last company I was in, I used to say most data scientists and data people understand that a select star is the equivalent of it was, a dark and stormy night. It's the beginning of the story where we start to look at data and understand what's in there. Well, please don't do select star for performance reasons, but you know what I mean. You're basically needing to look at this data, understand what it is, and then you can kind of start to figure out what the rules are.
So Ben, are they engaging with data profiling at the bronze layer, or are you suggesting going even further left, engaging with it bronze and silver?
Yeah. What basically the platforms make it super easy for you to do is once you've got data in at the bronze layer, there's no transformations. You can profile it, you can start to see what it looks like so that you can create rules in the silver layer. Like for example, if I am to profile a data set that has to do with disease prevalence among a population, and I do a quick profile and I notice that my gender distribution only includes males, like that's it. Well, okay. That's not going to work for my data, right? And so I immediately do two things. I'm like, okay, we got to fix the pipeline, but I'm going to create a rule now to help me prevent this in the future. I don't want that distribution coming through and not realize that I totally don't have a good gender distribution. Otherwise, the data is not going to help me. So that's why we profile first, but then we start building rules for the silver layer. And within Databricks, they have just made it super simple. Like when you create a table, you can create a constraint that then the metadata for that is tracked. And you can see this nice little data quality pop-up is just built in. You click on the table and you can see it as that rule is either passed or failed. And you can see that throughout the pipelines, how they do that. And this is a super simple example, but you can create whole dashboards with the metadata around those rules that are built right in to the create statement. So with ANSI SQL, you can do it.
I think it's key that like all of that is possible in both Azure, Like Fabric Notebooks has it. We have Snowflake Notebooks. We could be doing it in Jupyter like we've done in the past on multiple projects. So while this is a Databricks example, everything that's been shown to date, I mean, I've done before in Snowflake and am doing in Snowflake and Databricks as well as Fabric. So all of our teams, this is sort of pervasive around how we deploy. So I think it's important to remember that there's nothing that is platform specific. It just needs to be tailored to the platform.
Yeah, and you can almost bank on it that if one platform creates some additional functionality, it's going to show up in the other ones within at least a few months. And it's actually great to see them compete because we get this sort of functionality in all the platforms. And yeah, you're exactly right. Then here we have this sort of built-in dashboard that is based on a monitoring capability where monitoring allows you to say, you know what, I want to watch some statistical properties of data as it continues to get loaded, and I want to see how it's going. And if you see changes in those statistical properties, then you can know you've got to pay attention to it. And like super basic, we just have like load counts. You would expect them to be, relatively stable. And so if you have huge gaps or things, that allows you to see it right away with a simple dashboard. The other thing is you can set up monitors. So again, like what Rex said, every platform has this. You can send yourself alerts either to you if you're a single data team, or you can set up as we go through kind of a governance framework, like who are the people, who are the stewards who need to get alerted when this data is wrong. And so you need to have those stewards figured out and mapped out, and then you can set up alerts, and you've got the ability to monitor this stuff from the dashboards. Okay. I was going to quiz the audience, but I'll quiz you this time with the screen up, and there's going to be one more chance here. What the different domains are. We've just kind of shown, we don't have time to dive into each of these domains, but like Rex said, data stewardship might be the most hard when it comes to like, it's not a technical thing. I can go type out the code to give me data stewardship. You actually have to engage with the business. Data quality, I can do a lot of it like I just showed with what I'm doing on day 0, setting up my platform. Security as well, doing some of that minimum viable security work, and then privacy and metadata management. So
Ben, I'm going to correct you on one thing.
go ahead.
We get to work with the business on this, right? It's really key that that the business is part of a data platform from day 0, because that is the fastest way to a swamp or a failed warehouse, is not having that business person as part of it in the beginning. And I know that's something that it's like part of what we just say it constantly, but I want the audience to hear it's like, make sure the business is included from the day 0.
Yeah, and that can be something that, you love your technical engineers who just are, super good at coding and making these data systems. And that's something even I can be guilty of when I get excited about doing the tech work, that you forget about that, but that's not, it doesn't work that way. So, yeah, it has been such a privilege to work with business people who sort of interact with data people, and you get a much better outcome. So just a nod to the fact that, as Rex was saying, we could have shown this in Snowflake, we could have shown it in Fabric. So if we're doing security, for example, in Snowflake, I don't know how many of you knew this, but you literally have a quick starter dashboard that can get you up and running to see security monitoring results around configuration, around policies, around identity and authentication. And I've implemented this dashboard in a matter of just a couple hours. So it's super, right off the bat. And then this, you don't even have to implement. You can go to the Trust Center, and it starts to give you insights around your security issues. So just making a nod to the fact that this is like every platform. It has stuff built in, and it'll look different depending on which platform you're in. But there's things you can implement right away that don't take too much time to get going with. Okay, well, too late for the quiz, but just want us to remember kind of the things we're thinking about here: stewardship, quality, security and privacy, not to the extent where you have a 2-year thing, but what can we implement right away that is table stakes that we have to get right? And then as we manage that metadata, we can allow ourselves to scale more.
Well, I think also one of the pieces that I want to call out is, when you're diving in, embracing the platform fully. So one of the things you said earlier on the Snowflake monitoring slide is like some people may not be aware of it. And I think a lot of times we work with customers that have great platforms, Databricks, Snowflake, and they're looking somewhere else. But when we look at the platform, they're not embracing the full nature of it. Like for example, Snowflake's had data governance functionality that I can just code a function into a SQL script, right? I mean, it's trivial for me to start doing PII detection. It's trivial for me to do something in Databricks, and Fabric gives me so many different features and functionality to dive into. So it's really dive deep into that platform to embrace the MVDG approach. If what you're seeing isn't what you need for your business, for your use case, embrace the ecosystem, because there's like other great vendors around quality and governance that have deep native tie-ins on all three of those platforms that we've mentioned so far, and many others that can give similar MVDG pieces. Not quite the built-in platform aspect, a little extra cost, but the key is using it to drive the value.
Yeah.
Speaking of driving value.
Yeah, I'm gonna just real quick let everyone know that we do have we both implement this stuff, and we will help our clients with doing a workshop to help people kind of get on the same page about what we're doing. Sometimes clients really just want to dive into data quality. We have a workshop around that. We have an awesome workshop that looks at like, how are you going to set up your platform? A lot of times people are moving to the cloud for the first time. There's a lot of kind of getting on the same page strategy wise, understanding all the business drivers, and getting to a place where we architect a really good platform.
And I think,
and then there's other workshops as well that we won't get into, but there's a lot of capability here.
And I think on these two workshops, the data quality workshop, if you have a data platform that's robust, it's working, you really like it, but you've really been struggling with governance and quality and those things, that quality workshop's a great way to sort of visit what you have and find out how to expand the data quality and start getting some of those MVDG foundations built into that existing platform. If you're starting from scratch, if you're greenfielding a platform, then MDE design workshop is ideal, because we literally work with the business and IT and the technical resources from day zero to build that all the way through. And MVDG is part of our thinking process, part of our design process. So you can guarantee that data quality, that data governance foundation's built into things from the get-go. And we also will help you identify some of those stewards through that interview process when we're reaching out to the business. So we can help pull those stewards in very, very early on and drive greater value and success going forward. So I
want to leave enough time for Q&A.
Yeah.
Hopefully I've got that up.
Tim, do we have any questions?
Yeah. We do. So I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. How is the data governance articulated to differentiate roles and responsibilities between IT's data governance and self-serve owners? Businesses don't always appreciate the IT data governance models.
And that question really points to why was MVDG created, right? Because the IT governance models tend to be something that are they tend to be very technical, and usually not communicated in a way that the businesses can, in business language, where the business can tie it to what they're doing, right? How do we make money? How are we going to drive value? How are we going to run the business day to day? So there's usually just a communication gap that you do want to look at if you're a data engineer, if you're a technical leader, especially more the actual doers in the technical team. Recognize that communication gap can exist. I mean, the business doesn't care about iceberg files, right? They care about the ability to access data in a specific format. I think the other piece is assume that MVDG, assume these domains that we've put out are part of your IT governance model. It's what you build. It's just table stakes. It's how you do things. It's how you do data right? The other piece that the business is looking at is going to often tie into people, process, and policy. Now, you mentioned the self-service element of that right in there. And I think a lot of times if you've sort of taken that MVDG aspect, even in an existing platform, and said, of those self-service drivers, of those power users, who out there is a natural organic steward? And are they acting as a steward? Because if they're not, maybe take a little bit of a look at how do we bring those people into the conversation, because power users are big drivers. Now, if you're leaning more into a mesh architecture, that sort of can change the adoption downstream. MVDG is also applicable to mesh, right? Whether it's a data hub or a mesh, having governance foundations built into the platform is critical. It also means that all that people, process, technology, data catalogs, everything like that has something to tie into. The other piece I would say is embrace the agility. So MVDG says, okay, the policy says we have regulatory compliance needs. That's must happen type stuff. That must be coded into our overall pipelines and engineering from the get-go. Not doing that means, compromising regulatory compliance, and that's our business, right? We have to build that in. Going beyond that, with make sure that anything beyond the we must do this. This is my company's minimum viable governance for how I do business, for our regulatory landscape, for our business landscape. You got to make MVDG yours, right? And then everything beyond that MVDG circle, that's where we got to say, let's pause. Let's not take a book off the shelf and says, from 10 years ago that says this is how data governance should be. And then start reaching out into those natural stewards and those self-service power users and start letting them inform some of this, right? How do they find data? Do they want to have a mesh-like world? Do they want to have something that's more just consumption driven? I'll pause there. Ben, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Rex, just one thing to add. I know that sometimes a analytics, I'll call data governance initiative, can get lost in a broader data governance initiative, and that often happens just because if I'm looking at, well, I have to lock down all the data. That includes email, that includes files on my M365, that includes Excel files, it includes SharePoint, it includes all this stuff, right? Whereas sometimes the data team is just saying, well, we want to lock down everything on our Snowflake platform or in Fabric. And so just a note on minimum viable governance, you can get started with analytic data governance, and then it does need to roll up eventually to your overall company governance position and your security, posture as a company. But you can get started right away, and then you just make sure you're having the right conversations to bring that back to the whole company.
We had a follow-up there too. It says, also in regard to data quality, is the recommendation to have a data quality tool or have custom data quality rules implemented in where the data is stored?
Oh, that's a good one.
Question. Are you going to let me go on that, Rex?
Why don't I? Because I know I think that we're going to have interesting comparisons. So why don't you go first?
All right, I'll give you my 2 cents. My 2 cents is that one of the most important things when you think about data quality is language. How do we talk to each other about data quality? Like, I don't even know how to describe to you what data quality is unless I know there's a business driver for why I need data to be in a certain form. So if that data meets the requirements that a business driver has for it, then it's of high quality for that purpose. But other than that, I don't really know like what high quality data is. So it often becomes a conversation about the language and what we're expecting. And so that is encoded in rules that eventually get put into a platform. So one of the cool things about different tools is that they will give you a common language and they will allow people to get on the same page. You can do that with a platform. And I would say, don't buy a tool right off. Lean into minimum viable governance. You can get a lot for a little with what you already bought when you bought your platform. However, there is a place to scale up to a tool that's going to give you more than any of these platforms. They're not singly focused on data quality. So most teams, as they scale eventually to huge amounts of data and processing, will want to be really focused on data quality eventually.
So just to add on to that, so I would say a couple things. One is tool versus code in pipeline will also depend upon your particular staffing, your team mix and skill sets, right? So if you're more of a visual paradigm development team, then a lot of times the third-party tools may provide an advantage, right? Because if what's built into the platform doesn't fit with your staffing, maybe that third party is the fast path. Maybe that is day zero for you. The other one is basically data volume and velocity, right? So if you're dealing with just huge amounts of data, then it may, or too many sources, a huge amount of sources, the more code-based approach may be more challenging. Especially if you're dealing with like a visual ingest tool and you're like, hey, listen, we're going to use all visual tools for transformation. You may want to lean into that third-party tooling. Also, it can be like if you're doing IT, OT, if you're in more manufacturing, the minimum viable data governance can apply to the OT pipelines, moving from like logic controllers through your bus into like your Kafka streams or whatever. There's pieces there that you can build in some aspects of data quality right from the get-go. But then when that lands in that common lake, you may want to have a visual tool so that you can have that single point to sort of rally around. So data governance too often was a thing that we had to conform to. MVDG says make this foundational day zero implementation aligned to your business use cases, how you use data, how you make money as a business, right? And then also your technical skill sets, the way you want to roll out a platform, because not all of us have Silicon Valley money with a team of 80 to 100 data engineers to be able to like maintain our platforms, right? We could be dealing with a 3-person team. That's something else to take into account, because if a 3-person team's dealing with 100 data sources, maybe a visual tool is going to be the right way, because that tool will be far cheaper than adding FTEs to your overall budget. So I think those are some key things to consider. We're only have 2 minutes left. I want to make sure we get any other questions in if we have any, Kim.
Well, we have one more, but let's make it a quick answer. So how does team size play into whether you implement MVDG or engage with a full data governance implementation?
Okay, my fast one and your fast one, Ben, and we'll use it to wrap up.
Yeah.
So team size, MVDG, since it's meant to use platform tooling that's existing already. It can work with a 1-person team or a 5-person team, right? I think that there is a point where if you're dealing with a small team and massive source systems and, M&A on the horizon, you may want to like look at that third-party world as well, but don't neglect the platform, exhaust the platform first, embrace third-party tooling as needed. Ben?
Yeah, I agree. I've been before where I'm at a vendor and I'd love to sell tooling, but the answer is almost always, for me personally, as a data person and as a business person who wants my business to succeed, to lean into what you've got, figure out how to create something that creates value today, and then figure out how to scale it. And teams have a lot of success when they have that mindset.
I think everything you've heard us talk about is sort of our DNA, right? We've talked internally. MVDG is CDW core values built into the way we do data, right? It's how we interact with our customers. It's the quality that you've come to expect from CDW. It's just what you should expect from any partner helping you deploy something as critical as your data platform. When you're talking to data partners and they're not talking about how to make sure you have governance built in from day zero, ask those questions, because it really, caring about your data is caring about your data quality, caring about your governance is caring about how your business makes money, it's caring about how you drive value. And that's just sort of what we're doing here, is just bringing that as part of what we do day to day. Any final word, Ben?
No, thanks. It was fun. Thanks everyone for being
Thank
here.
you so much, everybody.
Yeah,
Thanks
we
for giving us
really
your time
appreciate
today.
your time, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks to Rex and Ben as well. Thank you as always. And if you don't mind filling out the survey, we would really appreciate your feedback about how we did today and how we can improve. Thank you so much.
Unless it's negative, we don't want that.
All right. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.
Take care, everybody. Thank you so much.